When solving any sort of problem with SOHCAHTOA, or when we're going to learn the sine law and cosine law, one of the first things that we need to look at is what is the angle of elevation and what is the angle of depression. When we're doing these problems, we always need to start by drawing a horizontal line. Angle of elevation is the angle up from the horizontal. And depression is the angle, wow, that's terrible writing, angle down from the horizontal. So when we're looking at these, we always have to start out by finding our reference point. So a lot of the times the reference point for the angle of elevation is just the ground. So we already have a horizontal, so there's our angle. But when we're dealing with angle of depression, even if we had the angle of elevation, so if we had something like a building per se, which is a common example, we need to draw a dotted line out. That's our horizontal, and then that is our angle of elevation. Now the big mistake happens when we're dealing with angle of depression. We draw that dotted line out and we draw a line down. The big mistake that a lot of students make is they put the angle of depression here. Well, we always want to draw it relative to that horizontal line. So that's actually my angle of depression. So if we look at this first example, we've got Kim and Yuri live in apartment buildings that are 30 meters apart. The angle of depression from Kim's balcony to where Yuri's building meets the ground is 40 degrees. The angle of elevation from Kim's balcony to Yuri's balcony is 20. How high is Kim's balcony from the ground? How high is Yuri's balcony from the ground? So if I'm looking at a question like this, I essentially make both of their balconies the top of the building. You don't have to, but it just makes it look a little easier. The question becomes a little easier that way. So if we were doing a question like this, diagrams are so important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my diagram nice and big. So we've got building 1. So who was in building 1, the shorter building? This was Kim's building. Kim is in the smaller building because she has an angle of elevation up to Yuri's balcony. So this is Kim's building. We know that the buildings are some distance apart, and there's Yuri's building. Okay, so when we're looking at this, we've got an angle of depression to the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a dotted line out from Kim. The angle of depression down to the ground is 40 degrees. The angle of elevation up to Yuri's is 20 degrees. Now, when we're doing this, we know that we essentially have two triangles there. Well, we also know, now I'm going to make this Yuri and I'm going to make this Kim, because I'm going to use y as one of my variables here. When I'm looking at this diagram, I know that the buildings are 30 meters apart. So that tells me that I have 30 down here, but it also tells me that I have a 30 right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into two triangles. I'm going to have an X and I'm going to have a Y. So when I'm doing this, we've got one triangle. This is the bottom triangle that looks like this. We've got X, we've got 40, and we've got 30 meters. So we can use this triangle, which we've created a right angle here, with our hypotenuse, our opposite, and our adjacent to solve for how tall Kim's balcony is, because Kim's balcony is going to be right here, which would also be right here on Yuri's building. So it's at that dotted line. So what we're going to do is we're going to use adjacent and opposite, which is tan. So we would have tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. We have tan 40 equals x over 30. Then x is going to be equal to 30 tan 40. And then what we're going to notice when we're doing almost any of these examples is that I would say 90% of the time, word problems that involve right angles are going to be using tan. It's very hard to use the hypotenuse in a question. Not saying it's never done, but a lot of the times you're going to be using tan. So here we end up with 25.2 meters for x. Now we're going to do the same thing with the top triangle. So we've got this triangle, which was 30, 20, and y. So if I go through that, I'm going to have my hypotenuse over here. So that's hypotenuse. We've got our opposite is our y, and our adjacent is 30. So again, we're using opposite and adjacent. So that's tan. So tan theta is opposite over adjacent. We get tan 20 equals y over 30. And then y equals we'll go 30 tan 20. And then when we go through and do our math, we end up noticing that we've got 10.9 meters. And so to find out how tall Yuri's is, we have to add that y and x together. So if we add 10.9 and 25.2, we're going to get 36.1. So therefore, Kim's balcony is 25.2 meters high, and Yuri's would be adding them together. I'm not going to show the math, is 36.1 meters. Okay, looking at this next example, this one's a little bit harder because you just have to recognize the two triangles. So using the diagram below, find the height of the cliff to the nearest meter. Okay, so when we're looking at this, and I'm going to do the math on the next page, but what we have to recognize is we're finding y. Well, we don't have enough information in this triangle, in triangle CFX, to actually work through it. So what we have to do is we have to relate something from triangle XCY, which would be this side right here. We'll call this side, I'm going to just change that y. We'll call that y and x because it's opposite of x. And we'll call this y because it's opposite of y. But y is in both of the triangles. It's f in our blue triangle, but side y would be equal to f. And then we can work through that. So from this, we know that that's the hypotenuse, that y is the opposite, and then this is adjacent. Again, we have adjacent and opposite is what we're working with. So coming over here, again, we're finding this side. We know we've got our hypotenuse is off to the side. We're not going to use it. So we're going to have tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Now that's going to be tan 52 equals y over 75. And then y equals 75 tan 52. I'm just going to get that out of the way. So again, when we look at this, we notice that we're using tan for a word problem. So this is going to end up being, just about 96. So we'll call it 96 meters. And now, once more, we know that this y is 96. Our hypotenuse would be here. So we're using tan again because we need to find x. So tan theta is opposite over adjacent. Okay, we're going to have tan 61 equals x over the 96 that we found. If you can leave it in your calculator, that's always going to be beneficial. For this case, it's almost exactly 96. So you don't really need to, but the more stuff that you can leave in your calculator to work with, the better. This is going to be 173.2 meters. Therefore, the cliff is 173.2 meters is what that squiggly line says.